Shabbat shalom, everybody. Our synagogues often are devoted to acknowledging high points, like Jacob becoming bar mitzvah this morning, couples about to set out on their marriage together, anniversaries, and also acknowledging low points when we have losses and we come here to say Kaddish and to receive the condolences of the community. But we know that there's a lot in between life's highs and life's lows. And what I want to do this morning is to ask us to reflect on all of the energy that we need to actually get through the days that are in between, the days that we are trying to keep our faith going, to keep our families going, to keep ourselves functioning. How do we access that energy that's necessary in between the highs and the lows when we get up and face a new day and try to do the best that we can? In traditional yeshivot, children would start learning the Torah not with the first books, with Bereshit, but they would actually start learning Vayikra, Leviticus. So they didn't learn about creation and Abraham and Sarah and Isaac, etc. They didn't learn that first. They would first learn what we read this morning about how the Kohanim would function, would bring sacrifices, would take care of the ancient rituals. And what can you possibly learn as a young child about how to live your life based on some of these very unusual texts? So we read this morning that the Kohen was supposed to keep the fire on the altar burning all the time. V'ha'esh al hamizbeach tukad bo lo tichbeh, u'v'yer aleha kohen eitzim baboker ve'arach aleha olah, v'iktir aleha chelvei hashlamim. So the fire on the altar had to be kept burning. It couldn't go out. Every morning, the priest would feed wood to it, lay out the burnt offering on it, turn into smoke the fat parts of the offerings of well-being, and then eish tamid tukad al hamizbeach lo tichbeh, a permanent fire must burn on the altar, you shall not extinguish it. Now you have to imagine how much wood was necessary to keep that flame burning, and the Kohen was responsible to keep it going day in and day out, and it wasn't supposed to be extinguished. Centuries later, the Vilna Gaon, the brilliant Talmudist and mystic who lived in Vilna in Lithuania, he broke it down more. He said, what did it mean to keep it going all the time? He said, af b'Shabbat. Even on Shabbat, you had to keep the flame going. Af b'tum'ah. Even when the priest was in a state of impurity, was not quite himself, he had to keep it going. Af b'masaot. Even when the people journeyed from one place to another, he had to keep it going. So I want to see if I can use his encapsulation as a lens to help us to face our challenges each day in a more effective way. We might think that we get a break from keeping the flame going when we are resting. That's not the case. We might think that we get a break if we are somehow out of sorts. That's also not the case. We might think that we get a break if we are in transition from one place to another, or maybe one part of our lives to another, and we also don't get a break then. We have to keep the flame going all of the time. I want to look at a few people and situations to see how this might work. So we are all aware that Senator Joseph Lieberman passed away recently. His funeral took place yesterday in Stamford, Connecticut, at the synagogue that his family actually belonged to for a few generations. And the rabbi said about him that he was there on Shabbat whenever he could be, and even as a senator, and he served in the Senate for a number of years, he would just hang out at the Kiddush when services were over. People would talk to him. They would ask him questions. Apparently, he enjoyed eating cholent, and he enjoyed having a little scotch, and he was one of the congregation. Now, one thing that's been pointed out about him again and again is that he was an observant Jew. And this was something which he did all the time. He did it when he was in Connecticut. He did it when he was in Washington, D.C. Sometimes he wasn't able to participate in certain functions because his observance prevented him from participating in the places and at the times that those functions occurred. And also, interestingly, he was reported never to have imposed his religious observance on anybody else. This was something that he did. This was something that gave his life meaning, but he didn't believe that religion should be imposed on another person, not personally and not in the larger sphere as well. So there is much more that we can learn from him, but I want to point out that this was somebody who kept the flame of his Jewish commitment burning all the time. He certainly did it on Shabbat. He certainly did it when he was in transition from Connecticut to Washington and wherever else. He did it when he left his role as senator and was more part of the private sector. And he also did it bitum'ah, notwithstanding sometimes the impurity that can come from serving in politics. A lot of people find that they are sullied, that they are not quite who they were when they started their careers, and that apparently did not happen to him. So what a remarkable example that we can hold up for ourselves, whatever our particular observance might be. Is there a consistency? Are we who we are at home and in public and throughout our lives? Can we draw a line that connects us? Are we able to keep that flame going? And a second area that I want to explore, all of us who have responsibilities toward children, it could be as their parents, it could be as concerned aunts and uncles, it can be as teachers, whatever it might happen to be. We know that our responsibilities continue day after day, and they continue throughout the lives of our children. Af b'Shabbat, even when we think we should get a break. I ask anybody who has responsibility for children, do you ever get a break? And the answer is, you do not. But that's okay. This is not something from which we are expecting to have an extended vacation. Af b'masaot, even when we are in transition, when we are journeying from one place to another, or journeying from one part of our lives to another, many of us have a difficult time changing the relationship with our children as they grow older. It certainly changes. I would hope that we are not involved in the same ways when they are 25, 35, 45, as we were when they were small children. But nevertheless, a certain thoughtful connection continues, and it is our responsibility to navigate that in a way that makes sense. Af bitum'ah, even when we are not 100%. We may be struggling ourselves. We may not be quite what our children need us to be at any point because of our own personal challenges. Still, we have to keep that flame burning. And I challenge all of us who care about children, however old they are, to think about what we need to do to make sure that that flame of concern, of love, of appropriate intervention continues to burn. I want to conclude with a quick story and then some final words. So I was in Israel a bunch of years ago, and Deanna and I lived in an apartment that we rented, and on the corner of that apartment street, there was a little makolet, a little supermarket. So every day I would go by there, and sometimes I would get coffee, and sometimes at night when I was feeling, I had the munchies, I would go get a snack. And there was a family there that tended to this makola, to this supermarket. And I got to know them, and we chatted over the month that we were there. The very last day that I was in Israel that summer, I realized that I hadn't taken the folder of beautiful notes that the second grade in our religious school wrote for me to put into the cracks of the kotel. It sat all month long on the counter, and I said, today I'm going to take them to the kotel. Today I'm going to take them to the kotel, until the final day when I realized, oh my God, I have to take them this morning because we have a flight in 4 hours. So I took this little package of notes, and I was about to head to the kotel. Now, I must tell you, I go to the kotel from time to time. It is often a moving experience. Sometimes I find myself not emotionally moved, sometimes I do. I have no idea, I can't explain to you. I'm holding these notes. I passed by this little supermarket, and I saw there was a father and a son that they were pulling open the shade, and they were getting ready, and I got emotional. I got emotional thinking about this family that is taking care of their business that helps the community day in and day out. And sometimes I didn't think about them at all, and I just walked in and I asked for whatever. And I thought to myself, this family is keeping the flame burning in Yerushalayim. They are providing a service, and God bless them. And let's not forget all of the people who keep all kinds of flames burning day in and day out, not just during the highs, and not just during the lows. So folks, let's not take for granted all of the holy work that we do every day to support our faith, to support our families, to support our communities. And may God give us the strength to keep the flames burning the same way that God gave strength to the Kohen, to make sure lo tichbeh, that the flame would never be extinguished. Shabbat Shalom.